Right, we're back. So just to give you a little behind the scenes here. So we had for the first 7 episodes now, we had recorded them just one in a week. We were doing the true experience where, you hear it the day after we recorded or exactly a week after, I guess. But, the truly immersive YouTube experience where the people are recording exactly as much at the same time that you're hearing them, right?
I mean, I
But
edited
yeah,
things
yeah,
barely anyway.
yeah, and we barely edit it, but because it's just we're just here to talk. I mean, there's not that much that has to go into editing this for now. Maybe in the future, more effort will be put in, but
Yeah.
with our view count and subscriber count for now, the means justify the ends. So
I mean, basically, we could do a thing where we have okay, and at the 7 minute mark, we are going to talk about this subject.
yeah, just keep us a little more on task, right? That could be one thing. But my point is that we've been doing one episode per week and just meeting up and doing it. But we're gonna start being a little more efficient and doing a couple episodes in one recording session. And part of my reason for that, other than efficiency of time spent and everything, it's sometimes or pretty much every time since we've recorded this show the moment we stop and when we're at 30 minutes, I'm like, yeah, I have so much more I want to say and I want to keep going. Like I get all fired up. And
Team
at,
talk.
at the at the end of and I mean our sixth episode, what was like 45 minutes long because I just did not want to stop. And then at the end of our last episode, we really started to get into another topic and we started to talk a little bit about adaptive reuse and everything, and these kind of big businesses going into these buildings that are historic and everything, but these buildings or these businesses still want to come into these centers because there's a lot of people there and everything, and it's like, yeah, this buildings from 1800s, and you certainly are not going to be able to put a drive through here, but we're welcome to any kind of commercial entity that wants to rent and put their business here. So that's how you end up with the McDonald's right in downtown and some building with archways and gorgeous details and everything. And you see it with banks too, like even in a small area that I am familiar with called Souderton, Pennsylvania. There is a excellent downtown revitalization program there, and they really did bring back a lot of business to a lot of their structures that had not been used very well. And for example, they have some really gorgeous buildings that were older banks back in the day, and now they are owned by Univest, a very large banking conglomerate that's here, and that creates an employment center in the town. And it's like if this Univest company was not here in these historic buildings, obviously Univest did not build this building. They are, like these really, really gorgeous structures from back in the day. And Univest is just in there because some bank that was there before went out of business. And then they come in and it's like, oh, now that's an employment center because you have these giant buildings, tons of offices, and there you go. And, a bank is going to employ a lot of people. But then there's also other stuff in Souderton, PA, like the train station. They turned it into a restaurant, and I believe it's called Northbound. Yeah, and that's like the place that you go in Souderton, right? It's a smaller town, has a cool main street, and kind of at the top of Main Street, you have Northbound, which is a train station that got converted into a restaurant. And so there are so many neat things that you can do with adaptive reuse. And the two examples I gave, one is like kind of a continued use of a building that's just old, like these buildings that are now Univest were banks in the past. But then you have this total conversion on the other hand with the Northbound restaurant, that it's like it's a train themed restaurant, but obviously the original use was a train station, and then they totally remodel the interior and everything to make it that way and stuff, and that's also a great use of an existing structure. And I just think that those things give a lot of pride in a community. And if if they had demolished the train station and put a McDonald's or a Starbucks there at the top of Main Street where it's like the end of it and it's kind of across an intersection, it's like, oh well, this used to be the cool train station, now it's just something that cars go past or
Drive
drive
through.
through or whatever. But now it's, oh, let's go all the way to the edge of Main Street because there's a cool restaurant there that the town is really big on, and you create helps bolster community and create this sense of place. And I believe we have talked about sense of place
Yep.
before on here, and so that's a big reason why I'm all for adaptive reuse and for historic preservation in that way, whether it's repurposing or a slightly different, a lighter repurposing of just kind of continued use after a bit of a period of abandonment.
Yeah.
So,
So it goes from, you mentioned things like sense of place and community, and for some people whose bottom line is making money, it grows the economy.
yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
that's an argument for adaptive reuse of the space instead of just demolishing it because it was cheaper and easier to get a contractor and throw up a building in a week or two or three or whatever.
Well, and demoing takes a permit, takes all this kind of different, there's all these things that go into demolishing a building and then building a whole new one. And in some cases, it's a lot cheaper to not have to go through all that or not as time consuming. In other cases, remodeling a building can be a massive undertaking and can end up being more expensive than just knocking it over and building something cheap. But, in other instances, it's better to use something that already exists. And obviously, environmentally, it's way better to do that. But
Yes. Right now, there's kind of a controversy happening because on the street here of Drockman, there are several old motels. And
mm,
these are very mid-century,
hmm
and the Pima Community College bought the land that they sit on, and when they bought the buildings, they said their plan was to do some adaptive reuse and turn them into you know, offices or just reuse the buildings and
yeah,
refurbish them. But now that with the price of construction materials rising,
hmm
going so high, they kind of pulled out of that and they announced that they were going to demolish them and turn it into parking lots. Not like there wasn't already a lot of parking there
right.
that is
That's the
empty.
worst case scenario right there.
Well,
Yeah.
anyway, but there was, community outcry, and I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I mean, really, it's an awful idea
Are
that,
the hotels abandoned?
yeah, they've been sitting empty for, I mean, years,
Yeah.
ever since I can remember. So, so basically, yeah, it's unfortunate, because I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but what are they, and they're just going to use it for parking. It just seems like such an incredible waste of space especially around a campus that has, there's a lot of, they've just built a new center, a couple different, campuses for different, I think, vocational, uh,
Right.
you know, um,
Yeah, Pima's
learning.
pretty expansive for
Yeah,
a community college. It's really big.
it's really unnecessary though to have all that kind of empty land or empty asphalt.
Yeah.
But anyway, but also taking something that's really, I mean, Tucson is very. I think that they're like really pushing their mid-century uh,
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
idea, and it's like taking something that's actually a landmark that's been photographed, I'm sure, hundreds of times,
Yeah.
and keeping the sign, but then demolishing everything else
Yeah.
for a parking lot, an empty space, just seems very wasteful. And it's been sitting empty for so many years, and I don't know, what prices will be like in the future. Although
Yeah, you never know.
I mean, in terms of building materials, it could go down again. It's hard to tell though.
Right.
I just feel like everybody here basically has a trigger finger for demolishing old buildings, widening roads. Everybody here it seems like they just want so badly to become this modern city, but it seems like everything that they build this modern is really, I think, some of the worst of our modern society, as opposed to these modern, amazing buildings, that actually contribute to the quality of life. It's
Yeah.
like it's like if being modern means more parking lots and drive-through restaurants that are those little tiny square boxes surrounded by, acres of asphalt, then I don't necessarily know if that's an improvement.
Right.
It's you know.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, adaptive reuse. I mean, the furthest thing from adaptive reuse would be demolishing something and turning it into solely a parking lot.
I mean, well, it's
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
absolutely the worst case. But I will tell you this to give you a little bit of optimism, given the
Hmm.
name of the show. Um, kind of you brought this up a little bit, you touched on it. And if you pay attention to the districts in Tucson that get given the historic district designation and that get the recognition. Sorry, I'm sniffly, but I usually am anyway. But if you pay attention to that, to what gets the nominations here, the mid-century stuff is really appreciated here. You have a lot of neighborhoods that have mid-century homes that are designated historic districts. The biggest one that comes to my mind, of course, is Winter Haven. And a lot of
Yep.
those areas up around there, I believe, are also historic districts. And then stuff that's older than mid-century too, like West University, of course, it's a historic district. And then to the north a little bit, Jefferson Park has some
That's mid-century.
mid-century, but it's got a little bit of older stuff too. But
Uh-huh.
that's kind of right at the cusp
Yeah.
on that stuff. But Winter Haven is like a distinctly mid-century neighborhood that is very well preserved and very much loved by the community, also because of their big Christmas lights thing that they do, which is truly wonderful. But yeah, so there definitely is some movements to hold on to these mid-century buildings. And what the other thing that you mentioned there that's really important is like you just got to see what the market does. And it's not to have that trigger finger of like, oh, well, building materials are so expensive now, so we're not gonna be able to renovate this. So, parking
Yep.
lot right now, parking lot. It's like you got to not you like maybe wait a little bit, see what happens if you can do anything with it. And
Or get grants or
right,
something, because
because they do give the National Park Service gives grants to help with nomination. You
mhm,
know, um, like uh, like filling out your nomination, like creating your nomination forms and everything. They'll give you a grant to help you get resources for that, but they can also help you with rehabilitation. You can get money from the federal government, from the National Park Service to rehabilitate your building.
yeah. So, yeah, I think it's worth it, especially in a city that has very, you know, few, relatively few resources, cultural heritage sites.
Hmm.
Yeah. There are
Compared to the
some
East,
compared to
yeah,
compared to the East, compared to
and I feel like that's why Tucson clings to mid-century so much because it's like, oh well, in the past 20 years, in case you don't know, some of the criteria for being on the National Register of Historic Places and getting, declared a historic site is that the structure has to be 50 years old, right? And so if mid-century stuff is around the 50s, well, that's kind of recently in the grand scheme of things turned 50 years old, with around the turn of millennium, of course.
yeah, we're talking like 1973.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, yeah, like,
That's 50 years ago.
yeah,
What's
so,
built in 1973 at
right.
Safeway down the street?
Right, right. People right now might not think that a lot of that's worth preserving, anything built in the 70s, but I always say this in that in 20 years, I'm gonna meet some young buck who like loves architecture from the 80s. And I'm gonna be like, dude, why? But that's how I feel about architecture from the 50s. A lot of people are like, why? These stink. And I'm like, no, they don't. They're awesome. Like I love mid-century. And so that's the thing is that like Tucson's history, given the history of post colonization history and um, just when this place was established as a settlement for white people to live in,
Hmm.
basically. It's very young compared to Philadelphia or New York, right? And so when you have things that are actually eligible for preservation, obviously you have big boys, not to be confused with this fast food chain that I just learned about from you, but the big ones like the Pima County Courthouse and the San Javier mission, right? Like
Hmm.
those are like no shit, those are going to be preserved, right? But then it's like, oh well, what else can we preserve? And it's like, oh well, now these mid-century buildings, they're over 50 years old, so we can make moves to say that they are associated with a distinct architectural style, and some of them are associated with some pretty prominent home builders of the time. So then you have reason to preserve them. And so that I think is why there's this kind of recent appreciation for the mid-century neighborhoods in Tucson and why those get a lot of recognition. I've done a lot of uh, delving into these.
Sure,
So
those are
yeah,
all fine. Those are all fine houses. I mean,
yeah.
good enough.
Yeah,
I
I like love it, and you're like good enough.
I mean, I actually I'm not terribly. I like. I mean, I tend to appreciate older stuff pre World War II.
Hmm.
But also I like, even stuff built in the 80s is cool and I like it, because that was when I was a kid. And
Hmm.
one thing that I think about though in terms of like buildings is that uh I would appreciate them if they were situated on the site a little bit better, a little bit more close together or more just creatively as opposed to, but everything built,
What do you mean?
what I mean is that everything is built, especially in the 80s and 70s, built behind a big parking lot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
like imagine, I think about it before to like make like I use Photoshop a lot, and I recreate street scenes, and I think it'd be interesting to use modern 80s buildings, but situate them on the street on the site
In a more walkable
in a
way.
walkable
Yeah.
way. Because I think, I mean, but because I see that, and I lived in Los Angeles, and you see stuff built in the 80s that is situated like in a walkable sort of way, and it
Hmm.
kind of gives you it's kind of got a vibe that reminds you of like Blade Runner a little bit, or
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever experienced anything like that because
yeah,
I mean the walkability in Philadelphia was built in the
and
1880s, so
yeah, no,
it's like
and now you're like
more like the 20s, but
yeah,
yeah.
like in Koreatown, K-Town, so built in the 80s around there, and it's all very built up, and it's just visually very interesting.
Yeah.
Even though we're talking like yeah, like lots of stucco, like blue roofs, like pastels,
Hmm.
um, steel
It's
railings.
probably cool. I need to visit. I have only been to LA once, but
Mm.
I should go and check that neighborhood out.
Yeah, we
So,
could we could we could go do a
oh yeah,
walking
let's do
tour.
something for the channel. Yeah,
We'll go to K Town. We'll go. I mean, there's a lot to explore in that city. That's for
of
sure.
course. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's a huge city. I've only been there for Dodger Stadium,
Yeah.
obviously, and the Echo Park area and stuff I did think was really cool and Pasadena and all that.
Yeah,
It's
and that's
really
all a lot older.
yeah, yeah. It definitely felt older and I was like, "Oh, this is like really cute. Like I
Mm,
like really liked it. And I stayed in this cool little house that was an Airbnb and I'm like, this
hmm
is great. And just on that, it's, where we're thinking about the spacing of buildings and everything, it's you look at some of the older neighborhoods in even like in Los Angeles, but what I'm thinking really is like the Midwest, and even further up, like up in like Winnipeg and stuff, you have these in like Minneapolis, Winnipeg, to some extent Detroit too, I think you have these older neighborhoods where the houses are it's still single family lots but they're like really close together because they don't have driveways,
hmm
right? And it's like a lot of these homes built in like the 30s and stuff and before the automobiles really took over and everything and people wanted driveways and carports and all that. You have these homes that are built in the 30s that are super close together, but they're not row homes. It's not
hmm
quite row homes, but it's like the next step away from that. Whereas, like, in Philly, obviously, it's all row homes all over the place, and that's what they built then. And a lot of those are older, a lot of those, 20s or before even. And so it's yeah, it's an interesting look to see a bunch of single family homes that aren't row homes really close to each other. It's
Right.
something that you don't experience in every city by any means, but I think that that is what kind of fascinates me about things like neighborhoods like West University in Tucson is that they are like that, where it's like, oh, look, a single family house without a driveway and it's got a smaller yard, but it's really nice and it feels like the amount of space that you actually would want. Whereas like these like giant homes that are built on these huge lots, it's like I don't need all that space. I would much rather have a smaller lot with a historic home, especially like a historic post-war Pueblo home, because those are really unique to the Southwest and
Wow.
you know
Post-war Pueblo.
post-war Pueblo. Yeah, like a adobe looking house that was built in the 50s
Oh yeah. Okay.
to give you a very you know
Pueblo revival.
yeah, well, southwestern revival they call it,
Southwestern
but
revival.
that's there's like Southwest Revival, I believe, can be like considered older than the 50s, but then
Hmm.
there's like post-war Pueblo is like the after the war, after World War
I
II.
need to look that up. I need to see examples of that. It'd be good to.
There's a bunch in those neighborhoods I'm talking about in Tucson where it looks like it's the rectangular,
Mhm.
like the non-pitched roof,
Right, of course.
Adobe homes, but they're built in like the 50s and they're really, really cool houses. And they'll be in these historic neighborhoods. Some of them, built in the 30s, whatever, right?
I've seen
Um,
those for sure.
and they won't have the driveway and it's a smaller lot. And I don't know, I value that. I value my house looking cute than my house looking big.
Sure, yeah.
you know?
Going from there, though, I'm thinking about so we're talking about a lot of these different areas in Tucson, and we're talking about like the future scenario. In 20 years, you think that you're going to be a planner and you're going to meet some new planner or some kid that's
Yeah,
going to be like,
right.
I love it. It was built in 1983. What a vintage year.
Well, it sounds like you're already talking that up about this neighborhood in LA.
Well, I mean, yeah, and then also MacArthur Park. Like, but anyway, it's a mix though. It's an interesting mix because you're looking at stuff built probably like in the turn of this, you know, the 19th to the 20th century or early 1900s,
hmm
next door to something built in 1987,
Right.
right? And you're seeing a texture, right? It's like a mishmash of different styles, all just kind of smushed together, and it makes it visually interesting.
hmm
Some people might even consider it cluttered. I like it like that though. But
Oh yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. We talked about that in with the Happy Cities book. The variance on
mhm,
facades, right? Like varying facades. It's like
mhm.
it actually looks appealing to the mind, where it's just like a big glass building is like
Well, yeah,
a little
it
scary,
is. But anyway, but thinking about the future, thinking about what's being built right now, and I know that we talk a lot about the travesty that is the drive-through restaurant explosion, self-storage, car wash, oil change,
You can do
nightmare.
your own oil change, man.
Well, anyway, but aside from that, but we live in a world of convenience now. People live in HOAs, and
That's what I'm saying.
if you even dare pop your hood in your driveway, you're going to be getting a fine or whatever.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
but
So you
anyway,
have to go to a place. You can't work on
yeah,
your own car anymore.
yeah. Did God forbid you even like take a rag and wipe down the dust? Anyway, but anyway, so what I'm saying though is that I was speaking of somebody who does some they do some entitlements, and they were talking about pushing for building these areas, these new buildings and projects with in mind the uh, the potentiality for when the self storage boom is over and
hmm
we are overbuilt with self storage, it's going to happen. There's going to be some point. Whatever's causing the trend, of course, right now they're saying it's boomers downsizing, moving, don't want to get rid of their stuff they've had for 50 years. Uh,
First of all, get rid of your stuff.
of course.
Second of all, continue with your
So, but I'm
thought.
saying that, like how can you build these storage units so that, well, for one thing, that they contribute to the quality of life in the city, even though they are a self storage unit. And in 20 years, when you're not getting anybody renting your units anymore, what can you do with it? If you
hmm
build it, in a very specific sort of way, you're not going to be able to adaptively reuse it for much
Right.
of anything, and so then you probably have to just tear it down.
Right.
But
Again, the high cost
yeah,
of modeling
yeah.
versus demoing, and you have to weigh that. Where sometimes it's easier to remodel,
Yeah,
but if you build it so poorly the first time,
which is probably what's happening.
likely.
And those drive-through restaurants, I mean, like really, I mean, like I saw they had a Taco Bell on the corner of whatever, and they I saw them demolishing it, and I was like, oh, because they were planning on there had been talk in the last several years of building a mid-rise apartment.
Are you talking Campbell and Speedway?
Yeah,
Right where it says "Welcome to the University,"
yeah,
and it's
lovely.
a Taco Bell.
Anyway, but they tore it down and they tore it down, and then I was like, well, they're obviously building a big project, and
Yeah.
they just rebuilt another identical looking Taco Bell.
Yeah, it's one of the funniest things. Like,
And so you see where we are, right? Like in
yeah,
terms of like, is it because you're like, oh, that's awful wasteful to demolish a building, isn't it? And then you see that They just demolished the building just because they're like, the old one was out of style.
Yeah, right.
That's
Oh, this one was
thanks.
built in 2003. It's out of style now. It's 2023. Come on, guys.
Smashing
That
fast architecture,
fast, yeah, fast architecture,
fast food.
fast food out of a fast architecture building. No, for real, it's depressing, and I think one thing to something funny about that is every time somebody visits me out here, I take them to that corner. I'm like,
This is the
here you
epitome.
go, guys. Pride and joy.
This is the epitome of my life in
Yeah,
city.
for real. Yeah, Speedway and
Campbell.
Campbell. Yep, right where the university kind of starts, and
Yeah.
then it's like every other corner of the university because then you go to Sixth and Campbell and it's like really nice. It's right next to the stadiums and there's actually a decent little commercial center there. And then there's some nice saguaros and it says "Welcome to the University."
Well, that's a different animal. And then across the
Yeah,
street is the building. Corky Poster, I think, was the architect, and
Momos.
it's
The
it's not the Moles. It's across the street. It's the multi-story building that's
yeah,
mixed
that's what I mean.
use.
The like commercial center thing.
I
Yeah,
mean, it has some condos behind it. I mean, the thing is, I think that it's got that big parking lot behind it, which I mean, it's good they put it behind there, so it kind of,
yeah.
it kind of contributes to the corner, but
It feels semi-walkable. I'll tell
yeah,
you, as somebody who used to run in that area a lot,
mm,
crossing Campbell is absolutely terrifying.
it's pretty bad. I've
Even
crossed it many
with the
times.
signal, I've crossed it many times too. But then once
Horrifying.
you're in that neighborhood there is called Sam Hughes.
Hmm.
Once you're in Sam Hughes, you're in heaven. I mean,
Hmm.
it's so walkable. It's so nice and quiet. Like
Yeah, it's a nice
it's a
neighborhood.
really really nice neighborhood. And then you have things down sixth a little bit more, like the Flores Market and the dry cleaners, and
That's a
you
little
know,
neighborhood hub right there
yep,
and I think there's some adaptive reuse in that section too, because
yeah,
you look at it was a gas station and now it's like a brewery
yeah. There's a
bar.
little bar in there. Yeah,
Yeah, and no, and the Flores Market Run, I think used to just be a grocery store. I was there when it was a little supermarket.
it still has the market, and that's a
Uh,
restaurant too now. Like
yeah.
there's clearly two sections to it. It's one of the, I think within the first 2 days of me moving to Arizona, I think that was the first like place I ever went in Tucson was to Flores Market.
Oh wow.
And I got some very overpriced bacon and some whatever, some just did a little grocery run there, and I was like, wow, $50 for three things, and then I never went back.
Yeah, I
But
don't go there.
no, you can't.
It looks like a kind of place that people go and they're just like, oh, this is cat.
I never ate at the restaurant, but I have heard that they do have good food, and I mean it's always very busy there. I mean I go past it a lot. It's always very busy, and but it's nice. It's got some nice amenities in that
Sure.
little area, and that's right next to a bunch of houses. It's you could easily walk there from anywhere
Yeah,
in that
that
neighborhood.
actually is like one of the few spots right in Midtown that's like that, and I think that we could really
That and like Time Market.
I think there's a lot of potential for adaptive reuse further down Sixth, and it's going to be a complete street. They've been working on. I don't know, things take a while, but there's a lot of other areas further down that street
Oh
that
yeah,
actually have a similar vibe. That if you really spent some time, you made the street safer. And there's a lot of empty buildings or underutilized spaces that all the way down throughout the city. And I think that it would be a fantastic area for neighborhood hubs and little places to get some groceries or uh, to have coffee or have a drink with your neighbors,
yeah,
So,
yeah. And then of course down sixth a little further, you get to good old Elcon.
oh goodness.
Everybody's favorite, which we may or may not throw up a little short of your redesign for Alcon.
Oh yeah, I've been
Yeah.
using AI and playing around with it. So I kind of got a little obsessed with it last night and stayed up 2:30 in the morning tweaking it.
Well, hey, you're making content, man. That's what that's
That's
you're on the
it.
grind.
That's it.
That's the thing. You don't think you're wasting your time doing stuff like that
Oh no, I
because
was fine.
we're gonna slap it up on the channel now, and you have another means to advocate for the change that you would like to see. But yeah, so we're hoping to get some more shorts up here and everything. Time is something that's hard to find. So um for us and for the listeners. So obviously I know if not a lot of people can have 30 minutes a day to dedicate to a podcast. So that's why
Just
people prefer shorts, and because YouTube and all them, they push the shorts these days, but
That's right.
um, we're gonna start delving into some short content. We'll still bring you the long episodes, obviously, but yeah, you've been playing around with some AI. I know you've always made some cool street redesigns.
Yeah, I was using Photoshop. It took me hours and hours, and then I got this AI and this app, and I it took me some time figuring it out. It's still a challenge, but I learned that if you just delete pretty much everything except for like the one element, major element of the street, and then put some prompts in, it really um, spits out some crazy stuff. So,
Cool.
but it's gonna take more work. I think it's gonna take AI and then probably some cleaning up because a lot of artifacts in the things that I produce. But for a quick mock-up of a concept, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean that's I've read, and if you're into the kind of professional networking side of planning, you may have seen this as well. You being listeners, I know you've read this document as well, Mr. Co-host. But the APA released their like trends report and stuff, and they talked a lot about AI and how AI can benefit planning, and it's like I'm a little, I don't, everybody's afraid to be like, that's not going to do anything because there were naysayers for things like email. And so, like, nobody wants to be wrong again, right?
Yeah,
But, I'm a little bit of a AI naysayer, but seeing what you're doing here is, it's pretty cool. So
yeah,
maybe there is some benefit, if we use it the right way, which I think doing a proposing a redesign is a really cool thing to do. My kind of concern with the AI stuff, and hey, maybe this is the next topic, AI and planning, right?
yeah,
Because we're at our 30-minute mark, but if we could really delve into this a lot. But my concern is, of course, you can show a cool design made with AI, but you gotta always have the human element. You have to go and walk around yourself, because
well, yeah,
you can never experience the heat in an AI generated image.
No, no, I know. Well, the
Yeah.
thing is, it's really a concept, and because you got to think about site plans, and you have to really think about. But like I did something on a flat parking lot surface, but if you were to go actually do a site plan and figure out, which way like the water goes or
Oh yeah, we
drainage,
run into all those
and
issues.
so yeah,
Yeah.
your design is really going to have to be contingent, and then you're really going to have to go, and you're going to have to create elements for that space that actually makes sense instead of, well, I just had this picture of a street or a road and I just dropped in some buildings and a sidewalk and a bike lane.
Yeah, right.
You know,
It's very aspirational, but it's a cool concept for sure. But
yeah,
anyways, we'll wrap it up there. We could definitely talk about some AI stuff if we want next week. But
perfect.
yeah, anyways, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time.